Don't sign him in. He's a vagrant.
How did I know morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Honourable Minister. We'd like to welcome you and thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come and be with us this morning. I'd also just like to welcome all those who may be watching or being part of the proceedings through our online platform today. Before we start the proceedings, I'd like to call on Angus Guthrie to just come and open today's proceedings in prayer. Thanks, Angus. Can you hear now? Okay, so
good morning. Can you hear me? Can we bow our heads in prayer, please? Holy Father, we invite you into this place today. We ask you to come into our hearts, come into the discussions, the deliberations, and Lord, give us wisdom. Lord, give us understanding beyond what is in the natural. Lord, give us a position that is genuinely led by you, Father, that any decisions and any discussions that come forward today will be blessed and will be from you. We ask this in your mighty name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
can you hear me? Everyone here? I would like to just at the beginning thank Pastor Gary Cross and the Northside Community Church leadership team for giving us for hosting us in this auditorium this morning as we have our meetings. Gary's not around today, but I'm sure someone can pass our thanks on to him. To begin with, I would like to just make sure that everyone understands the purpose of today's meeting. Our aim today is to present information to you from ourselves, from the minister, and hopefully bring clarity to things that may not be clearly understood. It's also an opportunity for you to ask questions of both ourselves and the minister, to voice your concerns about what is on offer. I would, however, request that we all please try to be respectful in the way we communicate our concerns and our questions. I want to highlight from the beginning that this is not a meeting where we will be taking a vote or a referendum or any other such decision-making process. This is purely an opportunity for you to gain information which you can then take time to think about, consider, and then following this meeting, you'll be given the opportunity to communicate your feelings about what is on offer. Having said that, I don't want to take too much time. I would like to move on to the offer that has come from the government for the payment of compensation. I don't need to remind anybody about what has transpired, but in case there's maybe just to refresh our memories, I would like to just give a little bit of background. I'm sure you all know about the Global Compensation Agreement and the terms of payment that were originally contained in that agreement. The agreement was signed on the 29th of July 2020. On the 29th of July 2021, we were supposed to receive 50% of the agreed amount of compensation for improvements, i.e. 50% of 3.5 billion. Unfortunately, for a number of reasons, but particularly the COVID pandemic that plagued us all, there was no finances in place. And we granted the government, at their request, an extension of 1 year. This brought us to the 29th of July, 2022, when we actually met in this auditorium. And we were presented with what at that time came from New State Partners, the government-appointed financial advisors, and it was their best solution for the problem. I'm sure you all remember it was 20-year bonds with 1% interest, which I think all of us greeted with absolute horror and quite rightfully took it as almost as an insult to us after having waited 22 years for our compensation to then be told that we could get $35 million a year for 19 years to be shared amongst all of us and then get our $3.5 billion at the end of 20 years was totally unacceptable. Since that time, we as a team and the government, and I must thank our minister, Honourable Minister, you've gone out of your way to try and, with great difficulty and severe restrictions, come up with something that is more acceptable and more workable and takes into consideration the situation of us as farmers. So that is what we are presenting today. So the offer is on these overhead screens here. I was hoping that I would have a laser pointer or something so that we could point it out and go through it, but unfortunately we don't have something. Anyway, so let me start with what's on the board there. Payments are split up over 10 years, and as you can see, year one, the payment that we would receive is $35 million, which is an interest payment. If you look on the column here where it says TB principal payment, TB coupon payment means interest for people who may not understand. And I was one of those until I had to start looking at this kind of stuff. So $35 million is interest that we would receive in the first year. It would be divided amongst us according to our Valcon valuations. That $35 million comes directly from the 20-year bond offer at 1% interest that was proposed by New State Partners. That is a figure that the Minister of Finance has assured us is within his capability of paying from his current finances. Year two, there would also be $35 million interest payment. And I must point out, the interest payments are going to be quarterly payments, so there are 4 equal installments. Year three is also $35 million worth of interest. Year four is where the first principal payment would be made, and that would be $350 million plus the $35 million interest. So at the end of year four, we would receive a total of $385 million to be divided according to our Valcon valuations amongst all of us. I would like to highlight here that we are in a situation where government has not performed. There is a complete lack of trust between ourselves and government at this stage. Under the original GCD, the requirement was that we, as individuals, signed a deed of accession at the beginning of the process. And I must just here highlight something. No individual, including those of us that are at the top table, are bound by the terms of the GCD until we personally, individually sign a deed of accession. So the minister has agreed to us receiving the interest payments and the first capital payment without signing any deeds of accession. That means you do not have to sign anything until the end of the 4th year, once government has proven itself by honoring its commitments. Should government not honor its commitments, you have lost nothing except you haven't got the money. You haven't given away any of your rights. You haven't signed anything. You're not committed to any the terms of the agreement whatsoever. At the end of the 4th year, based on government's performance, you would now need to sign a deed of accession before being able to receive the payments from year 5 to 10. However, those deeds of accession would be placed in a signature escrow with a custodian of our choice and would be held by them until such time as the government has met its commitments in full. So moving back to the table, at the bottom, at the end of year 5, so here, these capital payments come from treasury bills, treasury bonds that we'd be issued at the beginning. At the commencement of this whole program, treasury bills, treasury bonds to the value of each of those numbers and with the maturity dates that correspond with those years would be issued. So at the end of year 5, the treasury bond, the 5-year treasury bond will mature. Government will buy it back at face value and will pay us in cash together with the interest payments, which will be 32 million, based on the diminishing principal. Total payment to us would be 501 million. Moving to year 6, there would be a $500 million treasury bill that would mature, and government would buy it back at face value. We would receive cash, US dollars cash, payable to any account in any jurisdiction that you may choose. And so we continue with year 7, 555, year 8, 555, year 9, 555, year 10, 515. So that's the basic payment proposal that is on offer. And I would like to also highlight the fact that as far as the minister is concerned, this is a worst case scenario. This is what would happen if the current processes that are being undertaken to deal with debt arrears and other issues, if they bear fruit, then his plan will be to pay us much sooner. But we will elaborate on that in a little while. One thing I'd like to highlight here is that the treasury bonds are tradable from the date of issue. The only challenge will be is that on the date they issue, they will probably have very little value. You would, if you chose to trade them, you would probably get, we don't know, but I would be surprised if anyone would pay more than 10%. However, as we progress, and should government honor its commitments, those treasury bonds should increase dramatically in value with time. The other thing that I wanted to highlight is that these treasury bonds have prescribed asset status and liquid asset status. They can be used as collateral for loans. And here I must just highlight the fact that in our Gweru meeting, one of the farmers who was there is actually on our CFU council. He had heard about the fact that the payment plan would probably be treasury bonds, has already been talking to his commercial bank about the use of these bonds and whether they would be acceptable as collateral. And he was told by his bank in no uncertain terms that they would be more than happy to accept the treasury bonds as collateral. He could borrow money against that for recapitalizing his farming operations, for things like medical treatment. If he needed medical treatment, medical expenses, they were more than happy to take those bonds as collateral immediately. There wasn't this, they weren't worried about the discount aspect of it. The other thing that I'd like to highlight is that there will be no taxation of any sort within Zimbabwe on payments emanating from these treasury bonds, including income tax, capital gains tax, inheritance tax, SI6, all the taxes that you can think of. The minister's undertaken that there would be no taxation on those. And here I'd like to just pause and give an opportunity for comment or questions if anyone would like a bit of clarity. The minister's here, our team's here, and we would be more than willing to just answer some questions or concerns that you may have regarding the Treasury bonds that have, and the payment payment plan that we've presented. Does anybody want to ask anything? Barry? Yeah. Do we have the mic's coming.
Okay. Andy, very brief one. Minister, of the importance on that particular presentation, Andy, thank you, is that escrow, a point of escrow in the escrow facility, the international signature escrow. So I assume, if I've got this right, Chairman, after 4 years, the individual surrenders that deed of cessation to the escrow facility of the title deed holder's choice, and that deed of cessation does not pass to government until full, total, complete payment at the end or before. Is that correct? We don't, where I'm going here for just enlightenment, Chairman, is that halfway through this, there might be some folk that would need to redeem for financial purposes. But this letter of cessation doesn't pass hands until right at the very end, total completion. Is that correct?
That is correct, Barry, yes. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir. Can I ask you to wait for the microphone to come?
Okay, I don't know whether that works. Hello? Yeah. Does the Treasury bond have a quotation value on the Victoria Falls Exchange so that we can sell it at any time for American dollars?
Thank you very much for that question. Yes, the Treasury bonds are in US dollars, and they will remain in US dollars until fully settled. They are protected from any currency changes, and we'll make sure that this is so. Once we've agreed after the survey or referendum, I have to take this to Parliament. It will be enshrined in law that they'll remain in US dollars. That's the first thing. The second thing is that because they've got a coupon and they pay a coupon, they are tradable. So we can list these on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, but there's a process. We'd have to give it to one of these typical stockbrokers. They know what to do, and then these could be listed on the stock exchange, which makes it easy for them to be traded. But also they could be handled over the counter, which means that, again, an agent, a stockbroker, could sell these to a third party. The third party could be a pension fund, for example. That's why we've made sure that they've got what we call prescribed asset status. And pension funds ought to have some assets that are prescribed in their portfolio. So this will make the bond attractive to the pension fund investors. But also, some banks may want to hold it on their own account. They're supposed to show certain liquidity ratios. So we've made sure that this Treasury bond also has a liquidity status to it. So to make it very, very attractive. So you asked a very simple question, but I took the opportunity to explain a lot of other features of this Treasury bond. Andy has already mentioned that there are no taxes on them. There are no taxes on them for the income, for the coupon or whatever. We've really worked hard to make sure that it remains an attractive instrument as possible to allow you to cash it in whenever you want to cash it in. If you want to take it to a bank, to borrow against it as collateral, again, you are free to do so. And banks love Zimbabwe government treasury bills, whether they're Zim dollars or US dollars, better still if it's US dollars. So there's no problem there with banks accepting that as collateral and you then borrowing against that. I thank you.
Any more questions or comments? Yes, Jean.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Jean Simon speaking. We lodged Angus Selby's list of 20 questions, both with council over the weekend and Andy on your WhatsApp and Sam on your WhatsApp. Would it be possible, please, for you to go through those 20 questions and respond to them now?
Sorry, Jean, I think all of us have been a bit tied up, and I haven't actually seen those questions, sorry. Maybe if you have them, maybe you could ask them, and we could answer them one at a time. Yeah, I think it's better they come from the floor, ask them so that everyone can hear what they are, and then we can see how we answer them.
Right, sorry, thank you, Chairman. I was going to get this a bit later. Minister, thank you. Thank you for coming, spending the time. Doesn't seem so long ago we were in the same venue discussing pretty much the same thing, Minister. I must tell you, before I ask you these few questions, we were quite surprised, I think, confused and disappointed when our reps came back to us with a sugar-coated, cleaned-up bond proposal. We fully understand, Minister, that Zimbabwe, we're the same team, and we understand the difficulties of raising funds and where we are in the international community right now. But we thought we had actually said no to bonds way back, and I know they've been cleaned up. By far not enough, Minister, in the opinion of many, and I would hope by being politely direct with you, certainly always respecting yourself and your office, Minister, by asking some of these questions, no offense will be taken. This is business. We've met for the second time to discuss these bonds, and we must do it directly now, with your permission, Minister. And that to the Chair, could I ask a few questions?
Carry on, Barry. Yeah.
Minister, with your indulgence, there's only 6 that are lost. There are more. We've sought professional financial opinions all over the world regards these bonds. Most of the guys here grew fantastic mealies and so on, but we also have the ability to go and get opinions about this proposal, the pros and the cons, Minister, because it's worthwhile. At the end of the day, every person will have the free choice to choose should they go with this or not, and this has been one of the good things. But there are doubts, Minister. We have trust issues based on the fact that the deed never performed, and delivered, and government never performed, twice. Our representatives gave extensions. We always had conflict with that actual legalities of the document, which were totally iniquitous for the farmer. They were carefully legally structured not to be balanced. They did not fulfill in law what was promised by our representatives and General Chanakira, the late, at the Celebration Center. So as you know, there's been a great deal of debate. I myself personally brought this up with you at the last meeting and suggested certain amendments that are absolutely essential. You mentioned that you might consider doing this in the payment instrument, which is what the bonds are right now. It was of concern to me that if ever it went to arbitration, and other lawyers, by the way, Minister, that the primary document, which is this iniquitous, quite frankly, dreadful deed, would be the primary source of, for any arbitration purposes. Yes, of course, other factors within the payment instrument, which is what you're proposing now, will have amendments, and they could come into play, but we have a long way to go on that initial document, Minister, and there's no doubt about it. A lot of us are very unhappy with it. But now link that into the trust issue, because you're asking us to trust here, Minister. This is an IOU you're offering us. It's got the attraction of 4 years of the 35 million that you guys have explained to us nicely. And you know, there are many people desperately need this money, as been made very aware for you. But we've had these interim payments, Minister, which were very badly handled. They were inadequate and, what's the word, not always on time or as presented. By the time the guys got the money, I remember seeing a guy in the back of a car minister with a fridge and he said, "There's my farm." So, you know, we don't have too much trust in performance, as we saw in the interim payments. But throughout this, as I'm explaining to you, Minister, and I'll get the questions now, I just want you to know, seriously, we're all in the same team here. We're all Zimbabweans. We want to sort this matter out as much as you do. But, Minister, it has got to be fair. It has got to be achievable. We can't have folk out here or people that aren't here losing out. You know, Minister, you came from the diaspora, a very highly respected senior economist. I wonder what your opinion would be if you had been presented this particular bond issue as an independent individual. It is not a good one. It has not been recommended by anyone. Economists throw their hands in the air, Minister, quite frankly. But all this done with respect, Minister, you're trying to get a solution here. And we do understand that. The questions I'll ask you go to the heart of some of the problems here, as I say, presented by an independent professional. I won't go through all of them, Minister, but tell me whether you'd like to answer in public here, or would you rather consider them and answer via our reps another time. Minister, the 3.5 billion value, can you hear me all? The 3.5 billion value for improvements was agreed nearly 3 years ago at a material 33% discount to your, Minister, government's independent professional valuation of 5.2. We took a big knock there, Minister, for a quick solution, which wasn't quick at all. Now we're talking bonds. Will a suitable and appropriate time value of money be applied to the 3.5 billion to update it? It's out of date, Minister. And we took a haircut on it. Or are we farmers expected to wear the full brunt of cumulative USD inflation and opportunity cost over this period of delay? I think, Minister, you will understand what I'm saying. Basically, our 3.5 is already valued radically, and we want to know whether that figure would be re-examined on that basis. Chairman, would this sort of thing be for the Minister to consider and answer at another time, or would you like to have these answered on each question? Chairman, did you get that? Would you prefer for the Minister to consider this or answer question by question? There's 6 questions.
Yeah, Barry, the Minister says, let's hear all the questions. He's taking notes, and I'm sure he will respond at the end.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Minister. I understand. So basically, the first one was on the concept of the 3.5 billion, even with the haircut of where we only were receiving 67% as per government's own valuation. That came out of negotiations, Minister, so we understand. But now it's outdated again. And you're asking us to stick with the 3.5. The first question covered that. Number 2, the new payment schedule has been changed significantly and extended from the original front-ended 5-year plan to a back-ended 13, but I think it's 10. Is that right, Chairman, Minister? 10-year alternative. This is the total payment in 10 years. 10. Okay, thanks, Minister.
Not 20.
Yes, okay, thanks, Minister. So the original GCD was 5 years. Now we're talking 10 years. Will a suitable time value of money, Minister, these are all financial terms, as you know. Will a suitable time value of money be applied to this deferred payment profile, or are we, the farmers, again also expected to wear the full time value impacts of this delay? In other words, over the period of time, it's devaluing. We've got inflation, we've got deflation, we've got all the problems, Minister. And this figure of 3.5 continues to devalue. So, because it's 10 years now instead of 5, there must be attention given to that capital figure. The new proposal carries a 1% nominal coupon. Let's call that interest. What benchmark is this coupon based off, Minister? It's certainly nothing regional. It's nothing international. I think you as government would be very pleased to be able to borrow at 1%. Well, we're not really, quite frankly, very happy with this figure. In fact, we're very, very unhappy, Minister. It is iniquitous again. I use a lot of this word because that's come into a lot of our negotiations. Excuse me. What benchmark is this coupon based off? The estimate of the forward inflation at 5% per annum appears to be what a lot of economists talk about around here. We know that it goes up to 7 to 8, Minister, as you're well aware, and yet we've been given 1%. In other words, this 1% coupon delivers a net minus, if we went to the minimalistic 5%, a net minus 4% per annum real interest rate on payment. We're not winning there, Minister, we're losing. We're actually devaluing that figure of 3.5 every year and compounded in the wrong way. Are we, again, expected to bear the full weight of the structural discount too? You see, Minister, up to here, we are bearing all the weight. The whole figures in the negotiation, the offer given by government should have included all this to keep it interesting to us. It's not interesting to us because we're losing. 4 ministers, only a couple more. The original promise was for payment in USD cash over 5 years with 50% paid in year 1. So we would have had that figure in our pockets and it would have been used. It would have been earning money, it would have been invested. The new proposal now suggests payment in domestic government of Zimbabwe treasury bonds. It's a scary little statement, Minister. No disrespect, please. We're talking business. Domestic government of Zimbabwe treasury bills gives one shivers, and there's no disrespect. It's the history of this. With only 3% paid in the first 3 years. So we go from 5 years with 50% to 3% in 3 years. Given the higher risk and uncertainty around government treasury bills, and as I say, Minister, there is great uncertainty around treasury bills, we have a history of just rolling them. But, you know, it's not our business, Minister. We understand running a finance is difficult, but treasury bonds get rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled. It is the nature. It has happened, rather, Minister. So we are given the high risk and uncertainty around government treasury bills, will an appropriate discount rate, I say again, will an appropriate discount rate, 20 to 30%, by most professional estimates, I personally checked on 3 external top economists, be applied to the amended payment schedule? You see where we began at, Minister. We've gone down 20, 30% at least before we've even finished this conversation. That looks lovely, but it's actually not very good for us. Independent professional analysis suggests that with appropriate discount assumptions...
Sorry, Barry, can you just repeat that question the minister's asking about that? I think he missed that thing about the 20 to 30% discount.
Okay, sure. Okay, Minister, I'll go very quickly again. The new proposal now suggests payment in treasury bonds with only 3% paid in the first 3 years. I assume they're referring their Minister to the coupon rate. But I assume this particular professional is getting at thereafter the loss of value of the currency when he says, given the higher risk and uncertainty around government treasury bonds, will an appropriate discount rate, 20 to 30% by most professional estimates, be applied to the amendment payment schedule? May I move on, Chairman? Again, Minister, this is just, you know, we're talking business here. No one is trying to be insulting or destructive of the incredible work that must have gone into this by the entire top table. But we need to talk about the issues here. Independent professional analysis suggests that with appropriate discount assumptions, the net present value of the new proposal will deliver 10 to 20 cents of the dollar, Minister. simplistically, you're going to get 10 to 20% of what was offered you in the original GCD at the end of the day. This is done with the discounts, the assumptions, the inflation, and so on that these experts have looked at, Minister, and I'm sure you are well aware of. I.e., 10 to 20% of the already discounted 3.5 billion promised in 2020. What this particular professional is saying, Minister, is that at the end of the day, in 10 years' time, whatever you were offered under the GCD and under that Vulcan thing sent you, you will end up with 10 to 20% of it. And also, not to forget, you still have deductions to be made for Vulcan, etc. Minister, the final one, you've been most patient, and I do appreciate it. The government of Zimbabwe has already defaulted twice on the GCD, and 2 extensions have already effectively been given. This goes back to what I had inferred earlier, Minister. Are there any changes in the revised offer? You must have it in mind. Perhaps the lawyers have already drawn it up, Minister. Are there any changes in the revised offer that benefit us, the farmers? Because that, honestly, Minister, that terrible document didn't do much for us. It was even, Minister, it had no conditions precedent, which is the CAPE clauses, performance clauses. So in the event of government not performing, we had very little on our side. Minor, when I say minor things, important things like that, Minister, and then any forward movement on this agreement has to have all the legalities tightly tied up. Are there any changes that benefit us farmers? Have there been attempts to counter the new offer with a more balanced and reasonable set of amendments? I think what he means there, Minister, is that when this payment instrument is attached in amendment form to the original deed, are all the concerns going to be attended to? Because they were considerable, Minister, as the primary one being, at the time, our statute law didn't even allow externalization of funds, and yet we were promised this could happen. But anyway, moving on from that, Minister, that is the only questions I'd like to ask you at this stage, and thank you for your patience in listening to them. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that very extensive intervention and set of questions. I think, first of all, I want to deal with this issue of performance, trust building, and so forth, which I think in your preamble you started off from. And by the way, I've heard this comment when we've had other conversations in other venues during this process. Colleagues, I like to call you colleagues. You see, this time is different. This time is different. I'll tell you what's going on. What's going on? What's going on is that since our last meeting, first of all, we've responded to the negative feedback we got from you that 20 years is too long. We've now come up with a plan that we can, be able to deal with this liability within a period of 10 years. So we've shortened the period, but also government finances are a lot stronger since we last met. But what has really changed is the whole debt arrears program for the country. We owe the World Bank money. We owe the African Development Bank money. We owe the European Investment Bank money. We also owe 17 Paris Club countries, member countries, money as well. So we have a liability, quite a huge liability externally. And then we've agreed that we need a process that the President of the African Development Bank has agreed to lead, Dr. Adesina, working with President Chisano, the former president of Mozambique, which is bringing all the creditors together. because we've understood that clearing, the process of clearing all these areas outside has to include the compensation for farmers, which we're discussing today. So the two are co-joined, they're joined at the hip. That's what has changed. Some of you may have seen it in the news that we've begun this areas clearance process. We're determined that we work very hard to clear these areas. So on the issue, therefore, of trust and performance, we as the government of Zimbabwe have to perform on your payments. If we don't, we'll jeopardize the entire arrangement for the full arrears clearance program. So we have no choice. And we can only build trust on performance. I can't stand here and say, trust me. Some of you don't even know me from a bar of soap. Let's be honest about this. So you don't have to trust me, but I have to perform. Trust is earned. Trust is earned. And if we don't perform, we'll jeopardize everything else that we're trying to do in terms of arrears clearance. I wanted to make that point very, very clear that this time is different. A lot has changed in our thinking. Now, let me come to the issue of the discount, the 32% discount from the original figure. Colleagues, we sat down and over an arduous period of time, frankly, endless meetings, and we came up with this figure, which was a compromise figure from both sides of $3.5 billion US. Some of you may recall at the beginning, government's offer was actually $1.2 billion US. That's what I found on my table as Minister of Finance on the first day in the office. That is the truth. And then we had to make our way and argue from there and deliberate, negotiate, until we ended up at 3.5 billion. That's what happened, colleagues. The government offer was a lot lower than what we're talking about today. But I should let you know. Now, on the issue of the schedule of payments, and that on the issue of time value of money, you know what? As we speak right now, you already have at least 10% of the value of the 3.5 billion, which is 350 million US dollars, in the bag. It is in the bag in the form of the shares in the mining group Kovimba. I'm not exaggerating. You see, just if you take the value of, I don't know who operates in the lithium sector here. Anyone deals in lithium or something like, no? Well, that's fine. No miners, We're all farmers who till the land. Just the value of, someone is recording. Okay. I can't say the value now. The camera is on. But it's huge numbers that I'm talking about. Just the value of Sandawana mine, one mine that produces the lithium, the best lithium in the country, is under the Kovimba group of companies. Its value is massive. I've got the figure because we did the calculation the other day. So the value of your shares as I speak is way above the 10%, the 350 million US dollars. So you have value in the bag already. So I want to challenge your analyst, the one who says that when you sell these bonds, you only get 20 cents in a dollar. No, they are wrong. You already have at least 10 cents in the dollar now, just from the shares alone. That analyst is wrong. I'm happy to challenge them professionally. I myself am well trained in the area of bond valuation. I used to teach it. I've written 14 books on it. I know what I'm talking about. So I don't agree with them. I have to be very direct on that. And I would like to receive the document and challenge it. I'm not challenging you. I'm challenging your analyst. Also, my documents are. So I think, colleagues, the 1% coupon, which is 35 million US dollars a year, works out at about 1,000 US dollars a month. So I just wanted to break it down. It's about 1,000 US dollars a month that everyone will be receiving. And this is average, of course. We know that some will receive slightly more, some slightly less, but that's the average amount that I wanted to break down for you. Now, the 1% coupon versus the current global inflation, I listened very carefully to that. You see, when you craft bonds and design bonds or long-dated instrument, you take into account long-term past trends with some consideration of future trends. If you look at on the basis of long-term trends in the bond market, a 1% coupon is not actually a bad coupon because we've had a long history of low inflation globally. Yes, we're going through high inflation now, but our view is that this is temporary. It never lasts forever. At some point, it is going to trend downwards. That's the expectation. When you speak to every analyst, we can't be at war permanently, frankly, which is what has triggered really the bulk of this inflation. It did start, of course, with COVID, with the disruption in the global supply chains, but really the war is the issue. It cannot last, forever. So this is based on long-term trends. And here we consulted new state partners whom you met the last time we were here on this, and they felt that it wasn't such a bad offering. You also make the point that government bonds are risky. The only asset in this country that is not risky is government bonds. Trust me. This rollover issue, I also heard it in the other discussions, by the way, and so forth. That was 4 years ago. Under this government, under myself as Minister of Finance, under my watch, we have not defaulted on treasury bills. We have not. And there are no rollovers. We pay. And government, treasury bills and government bonds are in high demand. We pay. Just take a look at the income statements of the banks. You find that they make a lot of fee income, interest income, and then also the non-interest income. On the interest income, the bulk of that is treasury bills, because we are performing on our obligation whenever we issue these treasury bills. So I'm not in agreement with the analyst that treasury bonds are risky and we won't perform. No, we have to perform, and we are performing. Now on the 20 and 30% discount that may be applied on this instrument upon trading, again, this is on the assumption that we'll default on the bonds. We won't. So this 20% discount won't materialize. It will not materialize. These are US dollar bonds. We'll perform on the coupon payments and the other payments. So this 20 to 30% is unlikely to materialize. Actually, my view is that one will get quite a narrower discount than predicted by the analysts. And when the analysts, as I said, they are saying that the value of the bonds, the net present value, NPV, is about 20 cents in a dollar. Again, as I say, I've already challenged this. You're already 10 cents in a dollar as we speak before we even conclude this deal because of the shares in the mining company. So 20 cents is rather too low. And I just wonder what discount rate they are using to get to a net present value of 20 cents in a dollar. I think it's a rather harsh devaluation of the assets. The asset is a lot better than that. I think that's what a lot of you will find. Besides, if you're able to receive an asset today, and tomorrow you go to a bank, a Stanbic Bank, and you borrow against that asset, because you'll be able to do so. You'll be able to do so. And realize value immediately in terms of being able to use what we've borrowed. Surely, that says a lot about the quality of that instrument, and that's what will happen, because US dollar bonds are in high demand from the banking sector. The pension funds are also quite low on their prescribed assets ratios. They're all sitting around 3%, they should be at 10%. So the demand from pension funds will be quite high for this instrument. So again, I'm not so sure that the fear about this discount is founded. I have to challenge it. I don't know who analyzed it for you, but I really have to challenge it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. We have someone putting their hand up here. Can we have a mic, please?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. All protocols observed. My name is James Dolafag. In my short career, I've had worn a number of hats. The first one was actually working in the merchant banking sector in the 90s alongside the Honourable Minister. I was with MBCA when you had started Barbican. I was a farmer in Mashonaland Central. I'm a title deed holder, 2 title deeds. I'm a former ZTA president, and I had 2 objectives during that time. One was to fight in Reserve Bank for ASPEF money to try and stave off the vagaries and the debilitating effects of hyperinflation. And the other one was to try and dollarize the tobacco sector and allow farmers to access US dollars directly for merchants. I now am involved in an investment company in orchards in East and Southern Africa outside of Zimbabwe. But perhaps I need to disclose that my claim to recognition is that I'm the husband of Wendy Dolafag, who has been an architect in the administration and distribution of the equivalent of 8.9 million US dollars through interim relief, albeit in Zim dollars, albeit at the official exchange rate. And we'll all admit it's a drop in the ocean. But we also need to admit that when you're dying of thirst, every drop helps. Now, that leads me on to, I'll have a series of questions which I hope, Barry, will overlap with a lot of yours. In fact, there won't be questions, there'll be recommendations to the floor. But there needs to be a preamble, and the preamble starts with the drop in the ocean. We've received 0.25% of what was promised. But I want to concentrate on the 99.75% that's still out there and come up with some 5 recommendations. But before that, I need to join some dots. And the first one is a vote of appreciation to the very fact that we're all around here talking about the subject. And the first vote of appreciation actually goes to the government of the Second Republic, or the Mnangagwa government, and to the Minister and the Ministry of Finance for actually putting this on the agenda and keeping it on there. I can well imagine, Minister, that you haven't got universal support from within your own cabinet. I can only be skeptical as to the motivation that you've got for actually bringing it and keeping it on the table. But and these appreciations, by the way, are not to give anyone a warm feeling. It's just recognition. And most important, I think, is the final message in each of the votes. And the message here is, but I hope that your motivation is based on respect for the rule of law, respect for the Constitution, and respect, by the way, for probably the golden rule in economics in terms of agriculture. And that is, you cannot have successful agriculture without security of tenure and equity. Now, we've had 3.5 billion wiped off equity. If you broaden that out through the stock exchange and other companies, we've had more than 3.5 billion wiped out. If you've got 3.5 billion wiped out, you can't borrow a fraction of that, probably 2.5, which means, Minister, you're getting less than your fiscus, and you're having to come up with the lendings. You have to come up with instruments like agro-bills, guaranteeing agro-bills, or command economy, or presidential schemes. That didn't have to happen. So I hope your motivation is actually respect for the rule of law, respect for the Constitution, and respect for the golden rules of economics. The second vote of appreciation is to the other side of the table, to the farmers, for heeding the call to register all your losses early and accurately, and to have one voice. But the message is, this is not the time to have too much noise for that one voice. Everyone recognizes that there's got to be an involvement by government. At the moment, all I can see is that the involvement by government is on that table. So let's give it a chance. The third one is to Valcon for creating the vehicle for capturing the values following international standards, and for keeping that up, and for trying to bring as many farmers in to that. That database is invaluable. But they've got the power. But with that power comes responsibility. So please, Valcon, you've got to exercise full responsibility. And then finally to CFU and SACFA for basically stepping aside and handing the job over to CSC to CSC for opening the door with government and for keeping it open. Now, I say there's a message, but this is the time to listen to new ideas, to strengthen the negotiating team, and try and get us across the final line. That's the votes of appreciation. We then come to the GCD. There are so many good elements of the GCD that we simply cannot afford to lose. We're working with government both on an operational side and a negotiating side. We've got a 3.5 global settlement, which, as we heard, was slightly higher than the 1. Well, significantly higher than the 1.2, but less than the 5.2. In the scheme of things, it's realistic and it's stated and it's in US dollars. We cannot lose that. Third is we've got undertakings to vary the exchange control, tax, and other deductions. We cannot lose that. And fourthly, we've got an acknowledgement of debt. Yes, it's a debt, but we've got not a lot, we've got 0.25%, but it's an acknowledgement that a debt is owed, and that's on the table. Let's not lose it. Having said that, the GCD document was flawed. It is flawed, and therefore the subsequent versions of it are all flawed, and we've got to rectify that. So I'll come to the final one, which is a 5-point plan to try and get this back on track. A lot of the points will overlap with Barry's, and I'm sure all your concerns. The first is there's got to be default clauses. Default clauses in any kind of agreement either are penalty interest rates or forfeiture of monies advanced, but they've got to have an arbitration which is outside the courts of Zimbabwe. We've got to have some kind of international arbitration. Number two, time value of money. It's inescapable. There's got to be normally if you come up with a deferred payment instrument like a treasury bill, it's got to carry a coupon which recognizes two things. One is inflation, two is the credit risk. Inflation is here. It might not have been there when we started in 2020, but it's around. And the credit risk is there, and that's got to be factored in. Now, I hear that over a long-term period it might be 1%, but there are instruments. There's a LIBOR plus, there's the SA-US bond market rate. And by the way, Minister, you'll know that your US dollar treasury bills at the moment have a coupon of 5 to 7%. So I'm proposing that any of those three are accepted. 5 to 7%. I think the LIBOR is 4.95% now. That will take into account the time value of money. The third one is goodwill. There's been 2 defaults. Trust, evidently, as we've heard today, is scarce supply. I recognize the 350 million there. I think there needs to be a slightly an element of that which is front run right at the start to actually get everyone back on track. And then fourth is the administration. The administration of the IR program has been lengthy. It's been frustrated. Government needs to externalize the process of distribution of funds. They can always hold back what exactly they've got to sign off on, but the administration has got to be externalized. And then the final one, which I think encapsulates everything, is that the deal has got to be enforceable. At the moment, the GCD is really nothing more than a memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement. It's got to be translated into a legally well-drafted legal agreement. You've mentioned the Acts of Parliament, the allowances that you're going to give us on exchange control and tax and other deductions have got to be enshrined by an Act of Parliament. I think if we can do those 5 things, they're not unreasonable, they're not unrealistic, but they are fundamental, Minister. If you can get that, or you can assure us that you're going to be looking at that, then I think we have something that we can take forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James.
Chairman.
Okay, we'll have 2 more questions, then the Minister will respond.
Chairman, thank you, through you to the Minister. The reality is there's some people sitting here today that don't have 10 years. That's the reality. They do not have the 10 years. There have been interim relief payments which have been inadequate. So my question to you, Minister, is it not possible? You were saying that the Kuvimba shares are pretty valuable. Can you not get rid of those shares at an earlier date so that that money could be used to step up the interim payments to those that need money right now?
Carry on, sir.
John Taylor. Mr. Minister, the reason the government haven't had the money to pay us is through their performance and their inability to put a value on the land. I'm still confused how they're going to go to the World Banks and all these places and get credibility when they still can't produce a bankable 99-year lease after promising us for 4 years that it was 5 minutes away. Why can you not put back a title deed or a 99 bankable lease into the land, and then you will have the money, and then the farmers will have a value as well?
Any more questions for the Minister? Let's have that lady had her hand up.
Mr. Chairman, Bibi Mostert Karoy, could I ask if our national debt includes the debt to farmers? And in the event of debt relief, will our debt disappear into the debt relief bucket? Thank you.
One more question before the Minister responds. Over there.
Honourable Minister David Wakefield. Minister, when land reform took place, the average age of farmers was round about the mid-50s. We're 20 years on, 23 years on, so we're into the mid-70s as an average. The payments that you've proposed for the first 3 years don't even cover a medical aid. They also won't cover any, most of us are hobbling, we need a knee replacement, we need dentures, we need hip replacements, and none of that will cover any of that at the moment. And there's a lot of people, and I think the pressure is known by the CFU through the Farm Family Trust of the people who are battling to meet medical expenses. So unless that changes, we'll all be hobbling to a soup kitchen, and we won't even have the dentures to chew other than drink soup. So I urgently ask that there is a need for the speeding up of payments. Thank you.
I thought Harry was standing up to answer some question. Okay. Good. Thank you very much. Let me thank James, if you don't mind me calling you by your first name. Thank you for your comments that this transaction really should be based on the rule of law, be constitutionally sound. I agree with you. I agree with you. Just in terms of law, as I said, that I have to take this, if we agree at whatever point, I have to take this to Parliament so that it is enshrined in law and has to be respected as such, and will be immune to any changes in government in future. Absolutely. Then on the issue of, you raise about some of the good elements that we shouldn't lose. Indeed, let's not lose the good elements in the global compensation deed. You talk about for instance, having to include a default clause, the issue of time value of money. On the 5% coupon, which comes to about $175 US a year, that's what in terms of the coupon payments. Actually, right now, government cannot afford it. we won't be able to afford that. I have to tell you straight. Our finances have improved, a lot has changed. There's more fiscal discipline now than ever before, but we're not there yet in terms of being able to support a 5% coupon. On splitting up payments, the answer is yes. So I talked about, for instance, offloading the Govimba shares. You don't have to wait for 4 years. We could start looking at it right now, actually, and see if we could offload that, so that we could also meet the 10% payment a lot earlier. Splitting up payments administratively, I agree with this, that we don't want in the future to continue to have the same delays, and that we need parliamentary approval. Again, I agree with you there. And of course that the Govimba shares can be sold earlier. Then on someone actually asked about selling them immediately or earlier. The answer is yes. As I say, the value of just one mine, because you have three key mines really, is Frederick Rebecca, which is gold, and then we have now got the lithium mine, which is Sandawana, and then we have got Bindura nickel. Those are three key assets within that Govimba stable, and then there are other smaller assets, but those already are seriously valuable assets. And then on the 99-year lease, yes, there's been delays in concluding the documents that support the 99-year lease. The draft itself is ready, but the issue is the omnibus legislation that has to amend various other bills or acts to make the 99-year lease enforceable as a document that is, valorizable, transferable, and bankable. It has taken long, but we'll get there. I'm optimistic that over the next 3 months we'll make quite a bit of progress. In fact, we've got a meeting on it this afternoon with the Minister of Justice. So it's coming along, but it's been slow, and I accept that. We need to speed up. As to whether the farmers a debt compensation, is that in our national debt statements? Yes, it is. Every 6 months I have to submit a debt statement to Parliament. So if you have access to it, you can take a look. You'll find the debt in there, but it's recorded as contingent debt. It only becomes formal debt once we sign up on the a new deal that we're talking about, and also issue the instrument, and I take it to Parliament for endorsement in the Finance Act. That's when it becomes formal national debt. For now, it's contingent debt. But when I explain about our debt, I include the farmers' debt. I always do. I'll say, your debt is so much, including the compensation to farmers. It's already contingent debt. On the issue of medical aid and so forth, I think your punchline there was speeding up payments, that we should speed up payments. I agree, we'll try to speed up our payments and at least make sure that they come on time. I mean, there's an issue that I've been discussing with your leadership, rather the negotiating team, which is up front here, about what we do with the $1 million in the form of the dividend from Govimba shares from last year. The money is still there, by the way, untouched. But I think that once we're able to agree on a way forward with this new proposal, we will make sure that that can be accessed to meet emergencies, medical bills for those who need it. I think that's really, there's agreement there, that's what we'll do. So to become available as soon as we agree on a way forward regarding this transaction. I think I've actually covered some of the areas. I don't know if my colleagues up here want to say anything or, yeah, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Minister, thank you very much for attending this meeting, as you did in Bulawayo, and set the record straight on a number of issues. I'm a little bit concerned because, you know, a lot of Barry's questions were sent out to every single farmer on the Vulcan database. And there were two issues that Barry has raised, and it surprises me. And I'm going to read them out to you so you all understand them. Treasury agrees to the request and commits to buy back the TBs at face value. Critical. No discounts. The funds are to be raised from the international market. Before maturity of the TBs, government will buy back those GCDs. What we need to understand, there are initiatives taking place right at this moment, and I'm sure most of you are aware of them. Government has committed that, and not us or you or government wants us to go to 10 years. That's the last thing on our minds. We want this thing settled as soon as possible. Right now, there's an initiative taking place with President Chisana and the ADB. We had meetings, I think it was about 10 days ago, with the ADB and the drive that they were moving with Chisana. It's called the 3 pillars. They are adamant, the ADB and Chisana are adamant that the debt arrears clearance must happen. They have to come up with a formula to settle the debt arrears. That is a big stumbling block to us getting international funding, and it's also stopping the IFIs, international financial institutions, from funding this 3.5 billion. The 3 pillars are, the first one is debt clearance arrears. Minister, correct me if I'm wrong anyway. The second one, James, is to address the issues of the politics, the constitution, the rule of law, and all those good things, and governance. The third is revitalization of agriculture and our compensation. We will be included in the 3rd pillar. We will be giving evidence there. We will be sorting the 3.5 out and making sure that if the debt clearance arrears is settled prior to the 3 years or the 4 years, whatever it is, that the farmers get paid in full. We need to understand that we are pushing for this to be paid as soon as possible. Not going to happen in a year. It's going to take time. The question we raised was ADB, and we said to them, what makes you think you can resolve this issue? Is there the political will in the country to get these issues resolved? And they raised 2 examples. One was Sudan, and the other one was Somalia. And the country manager made it very clear to us. Compared to Sudan and Somalia, we are a walk in the park. This is the only country in Africa that's still under sanctions. It's got to be resolved. the SADC region is fully behind this initiative to get the sanctions removed from Zimbabwe and get the debt clearance issues raised. And we are included in that debt clearance. We're getting 3.5 billion with no haircut. There will be a haircut. I'll leave that to the minister on the national debt. But on our debt, we made it very clear. We've already taken a haircut. 3.5 billion is the minimum we'd accept, and they've agreed that there will be no haircut to this $3.5 billion. So, gentlemen, the discussions we've had with the minister, this is a stopgap measure. It is a stopgap measure to give government time to resolve those issues with the 3 pillars, and with goodwill on everybody's part, I'm pretty sure most of us will see the money prior to the 10-year period. Everyone keeps saying government has defaulted, government has defaulted. When we signed the GCD, the Joint Mobilization and Resources Committee was formed. And on that committee sits the chairman of CSC, myself, John Reed Rowland, Andy Pascoe. Our mandate is to help government to source funding through the international community. New state partners did come up with a bill. Bill is a dirty word, bond. It was totally unacceptable. They raised it on the capital market. The interest rate was 15% over 15 years. Unaffordable. Nobody in their right mind would even accept something like that. Aaron Fox also did the same thing. They came up with a bond, 20% over 15 years. Those, ladies and gentlemen, are unacceptable. You're paying $600 million in interest alone without any capital payments. As New State Partners said, if government could afford the $600 million in interest, better they pay that to the farmers and exclude the investors on the other side. Risk, on the capital market, everybody quotes government risk, Zimbabwe, default payments, rah, rah, rah. Everything's the same, okay? So we cannot raise the money offshore, and we cannot raise the money through the IFIs because of the debt clearance situation. I'm just going to touch on Zadera because people have a problem with Zadera, and I understand why they do. When all else failed on trying to raise capital, Aaron Fox got hold of us and said, look, guys, we're not going to raise money on the capital market that is affordable, and the IFIs are not interested in doing anything until their arrears have been cleared. So they said to us, look, there's another option, which is suing the American government, which we all fell off our chairs. I mean, who are we to sue the American government? And they highlighted to us, and this is what we need to understand, they highlighted to us very clearly that under the American Constitution, when George Bush signed that act, it was unconstitutional under American law. And they then employed at their cost, three constitutional lawyers, they call them scholars there, to get a legal opinion on what Zadera meant. And the way they put it over to us, they said, look, Zadera was put in place for one reason. One of the reasons was because of the way land reform was done in this country, and they didn't respect the rule of law and the title and etc. He said, this same Zadera now is stopping anybody from financing or for government to raise funds to pay us farmers. So we looked at it now, and what we've agreed with Aaron Fox, and they're waiting for us to make a decision. We can't go forward on that until we have an agreement on the table. They're waiting for us. Our recommendation to them was, do a white paper. We're not interested in taking litigation out against the American government. Do a white paper, present it to the Congress and the Senate and to the executive American government. Let's see what their response is. Highlight to them where this is unconstitutional under American law. So until we get consensus amongst ourselves, we can't go down that route to see exactly how the two bodies, especially the two houses, would react to the white paper. And it's critical that we do get an opinion from them. They are on our side. Hang on.
I just wanted to highlight something on the Zadera Act with regard to our involvement in it. There were a couple of investors that were looking at putting money into things here that would have become available for paying compensation, and both of them withdrew because of the threat of penalties against them because of Zadera. What we have agreed with Aaron Fox is that the white paper that they would prepare for the Senate and the House and the executive in the United States is to request a window or a softening of Zadera specifically aimed at enabling anyone who wants to put finances into compensation for farmers to be able to do that without the threat of facing penalties. It was not, it is very specific, it's confined to that aspect, it's not a broad ranging lift Zadera. It's specifically aimed at making compensation payments available for us. So we understand there's other people who have other reasons for wanting Zadera there. We are not interfering with them at this stage. That's yeah, okay. Okay, all right. Does anybody have another question for the Minister? James, can we get a mic down here, please?
Thanks, Minister. I mean, we've got to be open here. Firstly, there's two ways to do it. Try and reverse Sedera in Congress, or actually comply with what they're talking about, which actually overlaps with African Development Bank three pillars. That's number one. Number two, a haircut. For us to say open that we won't get a haircut, there's got to be agreement by all the other creditors. So if before we finalize this, there's got to be an intercreditor agreement with AFDB, World Bank, and the Paris Club to actually assure that. It would give us, the part that I enjoyed most, Mr. Minister, was that you indicated that you're in advanced discussions on the restructuring of debt. If that can be translated into some kind of agreement or signatory with African Development Bank on behalf of the multilateral lenders, that would go a huge way to relieving us. And then the final one is there's never been a default on treasury bills. You're absolutely right. But the emphasis on the response that you gave is there's never been a default on domestic treasury bills, which is absolutely correct. The only treasury bills that have come up so far as I know, are ZWL ones. You hold the power to actually not roll them over, to repay them, and then issue. You haven't had that exercise yet on US treasury bills. So the jury's out on that. But I think we're heading in the right direction. I suppose the final question I asked is, of the 5 issues that I put on the table, do you think there's something that we can do to get them over the line? Thank you.
Sorry, can we have a mic down here in the front row, please? Just while we're waiting for the mic, I also want to just, as far as Adera goes, part of this debt arrears clearance process and all the 3 pillars is dealing with sanctions, and that would have to include some form of compliance with Adera or whatever is required so that can be removed. We've got the EU heavily involved in that process, and as well as SADC, and so just I'm hopeful that we will see progress on that front. Can we have your question, Tok?
Yes, I'm a simple ex-farmer and not very good at business. I would just like to ask the top line figures there of principal repayment between 350 million and 555 million. Where's that money coming from?
Thank you, Tok. Any other questions? Barry, is this a question for the Minister or a long, drawn-out comment?
It's your choice from the Chair whether you take it or not. Perhaps let the Minister answer and I
Sorry, can you use the mic, please? Thanks.
Perhaps let the questions from people that haven't asked yet, Andy, go ahead, and then at the when you finish with those questions, I'd like to ask the Minister something.
Any other questions? There's one at the back there, please.
Good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon, the front table. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Just a question through you, Mr. Pascoe, to the Minister. You brought up Sedera. Surely Sedera was put in place to help Zimbabwe go forward. And it meant that the government of Zimbabwe had to adhere to Sedera. It was to help us, not to hinder us, as is said earlier by some of the members on the top table. Maybe the Minister would like to address us and let us know if the government are prepared to adhere to Zimbabwe to help the whole entire population go forward and then get recognition from the outside world.
Honourable Minister, Peter Rosenfeld's Bulilima Mangwe, the other end of the country. Mine is a suggestion more than a question. We have been repeatedly asked to trust the government, and despite failures on that side, would it be a gesture to remove the racist elements of our constitution regarding land ownership as a gesture that wouldn't cost you very much? Thank you.
Can we give a mic to Mr. Munro, please?
Good day, Mr. Chairman. P.O. Mashonaland West. Mr. Chairman, normally when there's a legal agreement signed between two parties and one of the parties fail to adhere to his obligations under that agreement, but both parties are still keen to come to an agreement, surely what normally happens is that both parties go back to the negotiating table, go back to square one, and come to a new agreement. And I'm suggesting, Mr. Chairman, since government failed to adhere to their obligations under the signed agreement, that that agreement now becomes void. We go back to square one, and on a timeline basis to the date when those properties were compulsorily acquired by government, and start from square one, and that we therefore reject the current new agreement, which is worse than the one which was signed between the parties, and go back timeline-wise to acquisition where it makes use, or where it recognizes the time value of money and take care of US dollar inflation.
Thank you, Chairman. Hey, James, what a pleasure, man. Chairman, top table, CSC, Minister, we desperately need the assistance of anyone that's prepared to give some constructive thoughts and processes to us. Minister, let's just go straight to it. I'm not a believer in this bonds, and I really don't believe it's an adequate offer. If the offer had been worked on, we had waited, it had been worked on, it's just not acceptable, Minister, to a lot of farmers. Now, here lies the thing, Minister. We all want a solution. We really do. I know government wants, we do. When we see such an offer, Minister, no matter which way it's presented, it doesn't show intent. It clearly does not show political intent. The capacity is not, we're not convinced by it, of government throughout this period of time. And Minister, your good, well-respected self might find yourself in a different portfolio. We have legislation that has changed quite regularly. The most famous of recent was 1-to-1, you know that one. The judiciary is still confused what the hell went on there. And it was just, we woke up to it. So in other words, law in this country and the judiciary is of concern regards implementation of what we are requesting here, and that is protection clauses, escape clauses, performance clauses, etc., on an international norm, which is not happening here in the country and can actually, Minister, as you well know, be overturned overnight. I'm not trying to be obstructive here, Minister, I'm putting it as it is. And with the likes of James's and others, very good minds out there, Minister, you know, perhaps we could actually seriously take this forward, but there has to be the will not to present something like that. It's not up to speed, Minister. If we simply don't have the capacity, then we must all stay together. You know, Minister, what I'd like to, from my perspective, and I think many of us, we don't want to stop this. We want to stay together, and please, as government, understand, we really want to walk as a team with you, holding hands, to get a solution. Bonds is not a solution, Minister. It is simply, quite frankly, for a lot of us, not a solution. Now, for those that have to buy into this bond, I apologize, Mr. Chairman, but I'm nearly finished now. I had to just get this across. People need money. It's the constitutional requirement, Minister. It's in the Constitution. It's in the Land Acquisition Act. Government were responsible to have given reasonable and fair, full and fair within a reasonable period of time. We're still waiting. So these interim payments are not, it seems to be we've been thrown crumbs and we're lucky, and if we don't accept them with a smile, you'll stop throwing us the crumbs. You know, this doesn't help, Minister. Let us sit together with the likes of the minds that spoke earlier on and others, and your good selves and so on. Stay together as a team. And Minister, go forward. We don't want to close doors. We don't want to appear arrogant. We don't want to appear that we're inhibiting a solution here. But Minister, for many of us, that's just not acceptable. The figures don't add up. The protections don't add up. The history doesn't add up. And we can talk as long as we want. But for many of us, Minister, and there's a lot more than I think you perhaps know, this won't cut it. But we still want a solution. Thank you.
Last question.
Can we have a mic at the back there for the last question?
Honourable Minister and top table, David Wakefield again. I just want to give the Minister the assurance. All of us in this hall stayed in Zimbabwe in 1980, and we put our full commitment into agriculture. And up to the land reform, agriculture was producing, I'm not an economist, but it was around about 40% of our GDP and a lot of our export earnings. And from independence, most of the development on farms took place by honest commitment to this country. Dams, irrigation, the horticultural export side of things, citrus, fruit, beef production, all those contributing to exports were a hard commitment put in by the farmers in this hall. We helped government take, in the first 10 years, we helped government take this country forward with the development of schools, clinics, and uplift the life of citizens in this country. We gave that full commitment. I personally don't believe that the value of the improvements is a fair value to the new improvements that were made. Tunnels, pack houses, incubators, tanneries, you name it, to drive exports. We've been given a value on buildings, on the square meters of buildings. You know, some of these were sophisticated improvements that were put on these farms. You know, there were schools built, there was housing. I spoke to Minister Kangai, and he said to me, you got to go back. When I served on CFU, I was chairman of our Farmers Association, I was told, go back and tell your farmers. That was straight from the minister's mouth to me. Go back and tell your farmers, we really want a drive to improve worker amenities and housing on farms, and we want this done by the year 2000. Some of us put in lots of housing, schools, clinics, and everything. If you go back to those houses now, you would think there'd be no development there. There's no roofs, there's no door frames, there's no windows, there's nothing in them. But that was the commitment we put in. And we have been here supporting government. And so I just want to assure you that if you think you've come from your 1.2 million, I reckon we've come down from 7 billion, 1.2 billion. We've come down from 7 billion. And I don't think we've taken a haircut. I think we've had a crew cut.
Thank you very much for those questions. Let me start off with the issue of Zidera. And I want to combine, I think, James, when you started off, you said, look, it's probably best to comply with it. I think that's what I understood by your comment. And the other colleague said, well, Zidera was put in place to encourage Zimbabwe to reform rather than to hinder Zimbabwe, because a comment was made that it is now a hindrance. First of all, on compliance, a report was done by, which was led by, I think, Ambassador Schultz. Maybe some of you may have seen it or not. This is, I think, beginning of last year that it came out. And it showed that Zimbabwe had complied up to 70% of the Zidera requirements. So there's been, I think maybe another exercise needs to be done now to see how far we've gone in terms of that compliance. I had the opportunity to actually share that document on a confidential basis with the State Department in the United States government to say, look, there is some progress in complying with some of the Zidera requirements. Now, looking at as to whether it's a hindrance or not, you see, it's very clear. I used to be a vice president of the African Development Bank. And when it comes to board discussions on projects, and the same applies to the World Bank or other banks, the US board member in those banks would say, sorry, we cannot vote in favor of this project for lending money to Zimbabwe because the law, which is Zidera, says we cannot vote in favor. So I've actually had evidence on that actually it is a hindrance. And the way it becomes even more of a hindrance is when you go to the board of the World Bank, of the African Development Bank, and say, hey, Zimbabwe needs a rescheduling of its arrears, it needs this kind of relief, it needs that kind of relief. Because what happens is that when you clear these arrears, you actually need an interim loan, a 24-hour loan, from it's called bridge funding, from any of the partners. It could be US, it could be whoever. Basically, the board member in those institutions is obliged to vote no. That is the problem. That is actually the problem. So the statement that Zidera is a hindrance in us raising funding and getting relief is actually true. James, you come up with a very interesting idea, which is when we negotiate these haircuts, why doesn't then the farmer debt rank pari passu as the other creditors, be they World Bank, FDB or not? I'm afraid we cannot do that because in terms of these international financial regulations, the multilateral banks, so the World Bank, IMF, and to an extent European Investment Bank, they rank higher than any bilateral creditor. And you be considered a bilateral creditor. So those are what you call preferred creditors. They have to be dealt with first. So we are unable to carry out the suggestion that you are suggesting. We would have to do it separately in what you call phase 2 if we were to follow the normal debt resolution process. So we wouldn't be able to rank pari passu as what you call an IFI, an international financial institution such as the World Bank or IMF. The question about what's happening in year 4, where the 350 million is coming from, this is coming from the sale of the Kuvimba shares. That's where this is coming from. Then plus the 35 million coupon payment, total 385 million. 350 million is from the sale of Kuvimba shares. So in terms of the current arrangement, we're assuming that these will be sold no later than the 4th year in order to meet our obligation to pay 10% of the value of the obligation, which is 350 million. But we agreed here that we can sell those Kuvimba shares well before the 4th year. We can decide, once you're happy, we can find a buyer who work together to do that and offload these shares, I hope, for much more than the 350 million. But also, or the 470 and 500. But here, we are assuming really in another 5 years, government finances will be a lot stronger and will be able to meet those obligations, but also to sell other assets as well. But also in the deal that we're working on, led by the African Development Bank, we should be able to raise other resources globally by then to be able to meet these obligations. We have to be optimistic. 5 years from now, 7 years from now, the situation really should be better in terms of our international standing. And this effort by the AFDB and President Chisano will bear fruit. We're working hard at it. I think the issue of Zidera, I've answered. And then I think the comments from, is it Peter, on removing race, reference to race on the area of land ownership. Well, it's a message. I also take a look at that part of the Constitution and make my contribution in that respect. We wouldn't want race to be referenced to in terms of land ownership. But look, at the end of the day, unless I misunderstood your question, all the land is under the custody of the state. We can only access it through 99-year leases and other JVs and other forms of arrangement with those who already have access to that land. Land rests in the hands of the state at the moment. But you talked about constitutional issues. I would have to look into that and understand what these are. But thank you very much. Then on the issue of perhaps coming up with a new agreement, that this one perhaps has failed, we've defaulted, and so forth. You know what, colleagues? I think we have a wonderful opportunity right now. We have been discussing this. I wasn't even here since, I don't know, is it 2000, since the Fast Track Land Reform Program took place. We are now, it's now 22 years. I believe we're getting closer to some agreement. My worry is that if we throw away what we've negotiated so far, we've worked very hard at getting towards and achieving, it may be difficult to restart. Very difficult to restart. These things are also a function of the personalities who are in charge of important offices such as the Minister of Finance. I hope you're understanding what I'm trying to say to you. Personality matters. But also understanding matters. Some people will not have time to engage in these processes meaningfully. Was that not the case in the past? I think you understand where I'm coming from. So don't lose this opportunity. That's my really strong and honest advice to you. Seize this opportunity. Let's make progress. My colleague over there, now you have to tell me your name. You're not a believer in the bonds. What's the name again? Harry Monroe, thank you. You're not a believer in the bonds. Maybe I can't even convince you. But I believe that what we've put up there is a very good proposal, a very good product, given the capacity of government in the first place. We have even put in, as I say, the value of the equity part, which is the Guvimba shares in the deal. And we've shared this with the partners who are helping us to resolve our debt. They also are aware of what we're talking about here. And this is international support in the sense that when we meet to discuss the arrears clearance, it's all the ambassadors who matter, who are part of that process. At least the 17 ambassadors who are within the Paris Club. And we are having, I think, a good consensus that we're going in the right direction. So I would really like you to, I think, reflect and get behind this. My feeling is that this is a great opportunity. Let's not lose it. If we lose it, we may be unable to restart it. my colleague about the value of the improvement and so forth. I think we can keep debating this one, what should be the right value and so forth. But as I said, you know, I started off with a value of 1.2 billion. That was on my desk from the previous negotiations and conversations that were taking place. And I really worked hard for us to get to the 3.5 billion with a lot of resistance from within ourselves in government. But here we are. I really believe let's seize this opportunity. Let's not lose it. Let's solve this as Zimbabweans. Let me say something else in passing. I hope I won't be misquoted. You know, this issue of the payment for improvements, we have to solve it together. You and ourselves. We have to solve it together. No one else is going to help us solve it. When I listen to some of the partners, the other countries, they are more interested in their BIPA farmers. Some of them are actually not. It's only recent that they are beginning to really embrace this process here. They are more interested in their BIPA farmers. They keep saying, Minister, yes, you're talking about the 3.5 billion to farmers, but which farmers? Is it the Dutch farmers? Is it, why are they excluded? Is this the Swiss farmers? Why are they excluded? That's what they care about. So this, oh, sorry, I dropped the mic. Apologies. I'm saying that if you speak to the European Union countries, really they care more about their farmers who lost land here and they're getting restitution through the BIPA, the enforcement of BIPA arrangement on a case-by-case basis. I don't think initially they had really their heart in trying to help us with this process. Each time we talk to them about the 3.5 billion payment to farmers, they say, which farmers? Is it our farmers? And the answer is no. But these are Zimbabwe farmers. So colleagues, I really want to urge you, if we can work together on this to try to resolve this issue, because we only got ourselves to work with and no one else. It's only recently that they began to embrace the whole issue of your compensation because it has come in the framework of the broader arrears clearance, only recently. But otherwise, it was just you and us in government and your leadership and your negotiators up here who are working on this. Those are the facts. That's my sense of what has really been going on. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Okay. The Honourable Minister needs to leave for another engagement. I would like to thank you, Honourable Minister, for taking time out to be with us, to bear the brunt of some quite tough questions, but to answer them frankly. And I just want to thank you personally for the way you've been willing to engage with us and to have some fairly tough discussions about the way forward. And yeah, hopefully we can work together to go forward. Thank you, sir.
Once again, thank you very much for engaging with me this morning. Government always running, you know, so I have to run and go to do something else in the office. Thank you very much for the engagement, and hopefully we can make progress. Thank you.
All right. I think we've all heard from the Minister, and I think we've had some very constructive suggestions from farmers here. I would like to just share a few thoughts that, just from our side, we've been involved in this process, obviously, for some time now. And, you know, we as Zimbabwean farmers, we've had it really tough for a number of years. For probably 18 years, there wasn't anyone even willing to talk to us about compensation. Valcon were working away, trying to get valuations, trying to work with government valuers to try and come up with some kind of realistic valuation, with very little progress. And since we had the change in 2017, there's been remarkable progress. And a lot has happened, and I think we forget that. The reality is that we live in a situation where politics has a very powerful influence on almost everything that happens. And as the minister said himself, that if this agreement fails, it may be very hard to restart the process. And none of us knows how things will pan out. We have some fairly hardline elements within government who are very anti what's going on. We have a population in this country that, when they hear about 3.5 billion being paid to farmers, they are saying, well, what about us? We live on 50 cents or $1 a day. So it's a very difficult situation we find ourselves in. But we do have an offer that's been made. We have a situation where at least there's an opportunity to get some money if government performs, and from the way I see it, at no risk if you're not signing anything away for at least the 4 years. I have been talking to Theo Diago, whom you probably all know now, for quite some time, and working with him, asking him, how can we raise this finances? Is he able to raise finances? Is he able to assist in our process? And I heard what he said in his meeting, in the meeting that was held on Tuesday. In fact, he spent probably 4 hours with us at the CFU council meeting before he attended the meeting at Dandaro. And from my perspective, I'm not hearing that there's a definite solution, there's a definite amount of compensation that will be paid, there's a definite payment plan, there's a definite time frame, there's a definite strategy as to how that money will be raised and how it will be made available to us. And I'm not trying to criticize or tear anyone down. I consider Theo a friend, and we talk often. We faced with a proposal where we could benefit. We might not if government doesn't perform. So from my perspective, unless anyone can show me otherwise, I don't think we have anything to lose at this stage, certainly not for the first 4 years. And there's the possibility that if we are proactive, if we work with our Minister of Finance particularly, and His Excellency President Mnangagwa and the Vice President Chiwenga, all three of whom I think are behind this process and want to see it succeed. I think there's a chance that Zimbabwe may be able to deal with debt arrears and some of the issues that have been raised, the constitutional issues with regard to land ownership, the 99-year lease, access to land. But there's got to be a starting point, and I think certainly from the way I see it, the starting point is there's got to be, the minister's got to be able to say he's got some kind of agreement with us that will enable the process to move forward. Obviously, every single individual here has the right to make their own decision. So, we're not here to dictate, to tell you what to do. We've been accused of signing agreements on behalf of others. We've signed agreements that no one has to be a part of unless they sign up to personally themselves. So, you know, that is the reality. As I said earlier, none of us, not even myself, are bound to the terms of this agreement until such time as I sign my deed of accession. So from So as I said earlier, and maybe I should just go back, the GCD, we extended it 1 year, and we've told the Minister that we will only extend it on an annual basis based on performance. If there's no performance, it doesn't get extended. We've got the safety of not having to sign anything for 4 years, and if government hasn't performed by then, it will have died long before then. So I hear you, but is there another alternative, another option that's going to get you anything in the short term? If there is, please tell me. I would be more than happy to back it and put my full weight behind it, but I'm not seeing anything at this stage. I know there's a process that might yield something, and we're all hopeful that it does. I think even the government would be happy if someone came up with a plan that would provide the money to pay us all up front. And as we heard, government can't even manage a 5% interest rate of 175 million a year. So there's huge constraints on government at this stage. Another thing that I want to emphasize here is that there's been talk of title deeds, and we're all title deed holders. I'm a title deed holder. There's nowhere in any of this agreement that you have to surrender your title deeds. That is up yours to hold on to. And even if you do accept the interest payments up to the end of the 4th year, you will still be free to carry on with whatever other options you're pursuing, whether it be the SI initiative or any other initiative. So going forward, our plan and the next step in the process is that once we've finished our meetings around the country, which have pretty much followed the form of today's meeting, we will be conducting a non-binding, no-obligation survey to determine support from individuals. I would hate to say I've got this much support or SIA's got that much support or whatever without actually giving each individual the opportunity to let us know. And as I said, it's non-binding and no obligation. If there's a broad support for at least moving forward on this process, we would then move towards drafting and working on the addendum that would make the new terms and conditions legally binding and enforceable. And this would have to be done by expert legal professionals. And Barry's argued eloquently about the fact that the deed itself is defective, and if it goes to arbitration, it may be referred to the original deed rather than any addendum. So those are the kind of things that we would need to deal with when we're drafting this legal addendum. The legal experts would have to give their views and see if there's a way that we can make sure it's enforceable. James has mentioned external arbitration. Those are the kind of things we'd have to look at to see how whatever is agreed can be legally enforceable and that our rights are protected in the end, that government does not perform. So that would be the next step in the process. We envisage that will be a fairly costly process and probably fairly time-consuming as well. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. So our survey will probably go out in the next 2 weeks or so, once or maybe 2 to 3 weeks, and we'll give people time to respond. If we get support and there's people are prepared to at least go down this route and give government another chance to perform, then we will go towards drafting the addendum. And that, I'm sure, will take a few months. Once the addendum has been completed, that's what we would send out to every single title deed holder, every beneficiary of this global compensation agreement, and allow time for legal scrutiny so that we make sure that whatever we are expecting, whatever we're being promised, whatever we are being told we are going to get is legally binding. It's there enshrined in law. And I don't know all the legal processes, but hopefully by then, Barry, you'll be able to see something that you're happy with. If not, then we will know then. and it's only at that point that we would have a referendum to find out who's in and who's out, and that would have to be a binding referendum. So there is time. We're not rushing the processes, but we do need to know whether there's support. So yeah, please. We would use the Valcon database, the same as was done the last time with the global compensation deed, and so that everyone who's on that database will get that survey and will be given the opportunity to respond. So, from my viewpoint, absolutely. We're not those that accept it, those that want to go that route. We'll make sure that it gets paid. The challenge might come if we only have 25% who accept it and 75% no, say no. Then where do we go with? Okay. Well, maybe we'll have to include something like that in our survey to see what the response would be and what the feelings would be. When we had our meeting with Dr. Diaga, with Theo Diaga last week, I specifically asked him, I said, if people go with the global compensation agreement, and if we get, say, 60% to support it, would that jeopardize or hinder what SAI are trying to achieve or the court process in South Africa? And I was told, no, it won't. And I have spent time talking to Willie Spies over the years as well. Numerous occasions I've briefed him on what we're doing, the state of the GCD, and said, look, are we going to damage or hinder what you're trying to accomplish? And he's always told me, no, you need to keep going with your negotiations. He himself has said, the legal process, legal rulings, judgments in your favor will not provide the money. And Theo himself said, it can provide leverage, it can provide some kind of pressure, but at the end of the day, if you cannot come to an agreement with the government, you won't get paid. And the reality is right now, the government is severely constrained in its finances. And I know there's arguments about funds that have been misappropriated and corruption and all the other stuff. The reality is, the minister told us last year, he can only deal with what he has in his coffers. And and that's where we are with the situation. Can someone give Dave a mic?
Thank you. Andy, most of us in this room acknowledge the fact that you guys have worked your butts off to get this agreement. Okay, there's shortcomings, and what we got to do, as Barry said, is sort out those shortcomings. Okay. Now, just as a matter of, if we start splitting ourselves, if 25% or 30% said they needed the money and they went for it, where does it leave the other 75%? One can't go with a minority agreement. And one of the things that SAI brought up was they want to work on a scheme where the people that are suffering and not getting a reasonable living income at the moment get some relief in that form. So I think we've got to negotiate. You guys have got to sit down with other guys within this room and sit down and see the best common ground that you can get, and taking advice from all directions and firm up on an agreement. And then when it comes to this agreement, if I came to you and I said, I'm going to give you 10% for your car, but I want the registration book, would you hand it over?
No, that's why we're not handing over our deeds of accession
We
or
are.
our title deeds.
After year 4,
After year 4,
you've got to put them into a pool.
After year 4, they go into an escrow until such time as full and final payment is made. It doesn't go to government.
So you're not signing over. You're putting it into an escrow account that is being held in trust, and pending final payment, the deeds will be handed over.
That's correct.
And if you don't get paid your money, you can withdraw your deeds.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct.
All right. Well, that's an improvement already. So let's try and sit down. We all belong to the same group, and it's just a matter of getting a broader agreement which will suit everybody. In other words, the people who can hold out a bit longer and the people who are desperate.
Yeah. So, Dave, I hear you, but, what are we going to achieve? What is your end goal by holding out longer?
No, I'm not saying we hold out longer. I'm saying we as farmers have got to get together, and you guys in this CSC there have got to draw on other opinions and broaden your base, take a bit of pressure off you, and then we go as a unified voice back to government, taking on some other things. Yeah.
Thanks for that question. As Andy alluded to, we had a 4-hour meeting with Theo Diaga prior to the meeting at Dandara. And I listened in on the Dandara meeting, and a lot of pertinent questions were not asked, which were asked of Theo at our meeting. He addressed CFU, CSC, and Valcon. The first question that was raised with Theo was, have you got the money? Is there money out there that farmers will get paid, and how long would it take? He said he had no money at that stage. He was talking to certain investors in America where title deeds could be used or could be bought by that group to raise funds for farmers who are in a desperate state. I would like to know who in America or venture capital company would buy our title deeds and at what value when land is nationalized in this country. I have a serious problem with that. He also said that he could raise funds to help farmers who are in dire straits. And I don't know if he's done the numbers, but he's going to have to raise somewhere in the region of $10 million a year. I don't know if he's got that capacity. If he has, then he must show it to us. But to go down that route, and one of the issues that he kept on raising was that we need to go to litigation. And by going to litigation, we will pressurize the government. Let me tell you something right now. That's the last thing this government's going to tolerate. He went and met Chris Mhlanga. Did he tell Chris Mhlanga, and if he was here, I'd ask him the same question. Did he tell Chris Mhlanga, who's the head of the War Veterans Association, that his plan was to litigate against the government of Zimbabwe? I bet you he didn't. I don't know, Andy, you were there. Did he ask the question? No. So litigation is a way out. It's not going to pressurize the government. When we first engaged with Aaron Fox 3 or 4 years ago, this issue was raised. Their whole drive was, let's litigate against government. Who is going to enforce it? We will win that case. He will win that case. There isn't a court in this world that will rule in favor of this government. Who is going to enforce it? We asked him, you're going to bring in new negotiators, new lawyers, new evaluators. What for? I can tell you right now, if we didn't have the Valcon database, we'd still be arguing today about what the value is. Thank God that the Valcon had done that work. People criticize Valcon. Yeah, fine, but you signed on the dotted line. But let me tell you, if we didn't have that, we would be in dire straits right now. When we started, when we started the negotiations with the Ministry of Lands, that just to come up with the value took us 13 months to come up with an acceptable value. Once we got that valuation, and before everybody knew about it, we had discussed it with the World Bank, IMF, and a lot of the embassies. And in every instance, they turned around to us and said, you're going to take a haircut. And we argued, on what basis do we take a haircut? The bill is 5.2 billion. They've acknowledged that. We are not going to take a haircut. And if you want a haircut, put your proposal on the table. So don't think that the international financial institutions are on our side. We are 2,600 farmers that own 4,500 title deeds. They don't look as though we're a problem. Don't like it, get out. One American said to me, you want to live in Africa, live by its rules. We need to understand what we're against. The minister alluded to, there are 15 million people here who are battling. You think they're like hearing 2,600 farmers are getting 3.5 billion? They get pretty cheesed off. And let me tell you, they are putting so much pressure on those three guys that are supporting this, and they'd love to see this deal fail. They would love to see it fail. So I urge you guys, we are here. We're not going to dictate to you. You make your own decisions. We are here to protect your interests. If farmers agree to this, we still have the Joint Mobilization Resource Committee. Our mandate is to raise funds. We still have those three pillars that we still have to address. And the fact that the European Union are driving that with the embassies sends a very clear sign that they are trying to resolve this issue. What I am worried about, what really upset me, is that the Americans and the British aren't there. They're not part of this deal. But they're driving it. And the ADB made it very clear. This is not just a Zimbabwe issue, because the president, I think it was Alan York who raised the question. He said, who's driving this? And the request came from the president of the country. We need to resolve this issue. And Chisana and DB were driving it. But they also emphasized that the whole of the SADC region is behind this initiative. They want this issue resolved. Zimbabwe is a thorn. It is costing the SADC region huge amounts of money in the form of railroads, electricity, and all sorts of things. So they want to see it resolved. We've got to give it a chance. You have nothing to lose. And if they don't perform, we will cancel that deed. We will state, you have not performed, finished. And you have not been prejudiced in any way. So think very carefully the options. If SAA, have got a plan, I'll tell you now, bring it, we will take it to the minister and we'll take it to the president as long as it's feasible. Because they would look for a solution. But I don't think it's going to be one that we're all going to like. Thank you.
Andy. Sorry, can we give somebody else a chance to speak? Dave?
Answer Harry.
Okay, all right.
Harry, look, we hear what you say. This isn't a bonus we're getting. We lost our homes and our livelihoods. If 15 million people in this country lost their homes and their livelihoods, they wouldn't be happy, and they would want their fair payout as well. So I don't think we must take that attitude. In fact, I take offense at that attitude. We lost our homes and our livelihoods. And therefore, all I'm saying is let's work together. Yes, you've got something going. Let's build on that. We're not saying scrap that. If it means bringing in Inside and they can contribute something or do something, let's just have open minds, and let's try and tie and dot the I's and cross the T's in what we've got, and go forward as a unified bunch.
I hear you entirely. Let's be very clear on this issue. Okay. Don't ignore the pressure that's on this government for this deal to fail. Please, don't ignore it. There are some hardliners out there who would like to see the status quo. And the only reason they're not is that the 3 guys who are supporting this have the whip. But if we turn it down, or we go to arbitration, which is our right to do, we can tomorrow. The deed has not been agreed to. We haven't given the extension. We can go to arbitration tomorrow. I can tell you what, the whip's going to come out, and it won't be in our favor. So don't ignore that there's a big pressure group out there who don't want this to happen. Please.
Chairman, President, if I can just make a couple of... okay. If I can just make a couple of comments. One, Harry made comment that Theo Diaga didn't have a plan. Theo Diaga has been involved in many, many negotiations. For those of you that don't know, he was involved in the negotiations in South Africa when they handed over the nuclear power plants. I don't think that's small fry stuff. He was involved in training the army in South Africa in negotiations. He trained all the military. So he's had a lot of experience. He's not going to come here and disclose his plan to us. He's going to work at it. On the legal side, South Africa right now under huge pressure. They're in the last court case. This is the final court case. If Ramaphosa loses this court case, he stands to pay every single Zimbabwean damages. It's not compensation, it is damages for the fact that he and Zuma and Mugabe colluded to pull down the SADC tribunal. They left with 9 votes instead of 10, and the SADC tribunal, they ruled, has been closed illegally. Tanzania has also taken its government to task at this point in time and said they left the constitution, the tribunal illegally, and so they too won their case. We've won the case in Singapore, the Van Petshoff case. The Dutch case was won, and the SADC tribunal was won. All the court cases have been done. We don't need to do a whole lot of new court cases. But I can tell you, one thing's for sure, when Ramaphosa sees the bill he's getting, he's going to quickly get that SADC tribunal reopened. And then we'll get a fair hearing, we'll get a fair compensation. When we get a fair compensation, the international community will then rally and we'll have a donor conference and hopefully raise the money, not only to pay the farmers, but to fix our country, because our country's been smoked as a result of it. So I think we need to be patient and we don't need to rush into these things. And it's not our job to take the pressure off the government. It's our job to get the best deal for our farmers.
Pete, maybe you have some information which I don't have, but I asked Willie Spies and I also asked Theo Diaga when he was here last week with regard to the rulings that are in the final judgment that they're waiting for in the Constitutional Court in South Africa as to who would benefit from that. And I was told that it'll be, I think, 7 or 13 farmers who already took the government to court. And I said, is it of benefit to the rest of the South African farmers? And he said, according to some lawyers, no, because prescription has already come into effect. Prescription means that you've got 3 years in which to bring your case, otherwise you're too late. He said there is another legal opinion that possibly it would be open to all the South African farmers because you can't claim until the final court case. But there's not certainly from the legal perspective that I was told, it's not clear that the South Africans would benefit, even the South Africans. And it's certainly, I was told, there's certainly no scope for Zimbabweans to be claiming from the South African government. So maybe I'm not correctly informed, but that came directly from Willie Spies himself when I last saw him, and from Theo last week when he was with us. So I'm not sure that it'll provide the same or the pressure that you are predicting. And I have also raised that with our own Ministry of Finance legal team about the pressure. And they said, no, there's no pressure. We're already in discussions with the South African Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and there's a plan to deal with it. So
If you draw down any of those funds, you must sign the deed of cession. So we told him to take his money and go and do what they like with it. Yesterday, he conceded. With this new initiative now, he is allowing us to use those funds for cases where farmers need desperate medical aid or whatever it is that they need desperately. So we have $1 million sitting in DATFest, which can be utilized to help those farmers that are in dire straits. So, and we will use that. The Kavimba money, one of the biggest problems with Kavimba that we're having is the valuation. You have certain sectors of the community who say that this is an extremely wealthy company. There's a lot of assets there. There's something like 22 companies there. We discussed it with the minister on a number of occasions. We need a valuation done. And in our addendum and in our letter to him, we've said we want a valuation done very clearly so we know what the 12.5% is worth. We need to know that. There are people who have expressed interest in buying it. But if we go to them now, they're going to give us peanuts because they don't know what the value is. I believe very clearly we could raise 300 million from our 12.5% shares with the information that we've been given. If we can sell Kavimba tomorrow, that 300 million will be dished out to the farmers immediately. We're not waiting for the 4th year. And he's agreed to that. If he sells, he's agreed also to sell other assets. If those other assets, and I'm not going to discuss them, if those other assets are on the market and he does do a deal, that money will be prioritized for the farmers. We need to understand that. We've got that, and we've got that commitment in writing. So I say this is a stopgap. Gentlemen and ladies, it's a stopgap, and we're going to be there pressing his button to make sure that we get this money as soon as possible to pay out to the farmers.
Okay.
Andy, if I
can I just, while we're talking about Kavimba, I have probably the misfortune of having been appointed to the board of Kavimba for the reason that I, as the farmers' representative, can see what's there and I suppose watch over the assets on our behalf. The challenge for Kavimba is it's been thrown together in a hurry, a whole lot of assets that were put together under one umbrella, and even the management are still uncovering the full extent of the assets. Some of them are not what they expected, but the lithium was kind of discovered by accident at Sandawana, and I can verify what the minister said, that the deposits are huge. And it was, so these are the kind of things that are, and this is the reason why the valuation is taking time. The administrative procedures that are underway to try and bring everything together, formalize all the companies and the different assets is taking longer than they expected. But as the minister said, it is a very valuable entity. And there's a few questions on who the shareholders are behind the scenes as well. We're trying to get to the bottom of that. And I'm sure we will, in due course, get that valuation. And hopefully we will be pleasantly surprised. And our 12.5% share hopefully will be worth a lot more than the 350 million. Sorry, Jean, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to cover something that people seem to be unsure about, this deed of accession. The General Compensation Agreement, the Global Compensation Agreement, in a nutshell says that the government is prepared to pay the agreed amount of $3.5 billion in full and final settlement of the government debt. That's principally what they're saying. The deed of accession means that we as individuals agree not to sue the government once we've signed that deed. It's got nothing to do with our title deeds, but what we are basically saying that we will not take legal action against the government once we've signed this agreement to get this $3.5 billion. Our lawyers suggest we don't sign it, but each person has a choice of being able to make that decision for themselves. If you don't sign it, you don't become part of the compensation that is received from this money.
Yeah, sorry, just one correction there. You only sign it at the end of the 4th year, once you've received your 350 or 385 million payment, and then 3 lots of 35 million. So there's quite a long, there is that 4 years where government has to prove itself and perform and meet its commitments before we are expected to sign, and then it's held in escrow. It will not be released to the government until such time as they've made full and final payment. The other thing, yeah, so yeah. Your rights are not infringed upon until such time as you receive full and final payment, if I understand it correctly. The other thing that also, the other factor that I would like to just mention here is that the land issue, the land compensation for land is not included in this GCD. And you may or may not remember that when the GCD was signed in 2020, we also signed another agreement with government that recognized the value of land as 3.5 billion, the land that was acquired. Government, under the Constitution of Zimbabwe, is not obligated to pay for land. And we have been talking to the international community, the G7, and from our interaction with them, there is broad support for a collective effort to get a land donor conference to raise that money, the $3.2 billion, for the land portion, but only after government is seen to be fulfilling its obligation to pay compensation for improvements. So from my perspective, where I stand, if we can move forward with the compensation payments, it hopefully will open the door for a land donor conference and a mechanism to be put in place whereby we can receive payment for the land that was acquired by the government. Unfortunately, these are tied together. And without one beginning to move, the other one is not going to move at all. So from my perspective, if we can move forward with this agreement and give government a chance to perform, it will open the door for the land portion to be dealt with. And the way that we are envisage it being dealt with is that money would come in the form of a funding for a land bank, and that would be used to reinvigorate and recapitalize and fund agriculture going forward, so the agriculture of Zimbabwe can get back to where it should be. And we as title deed holders would receive debentures or shares in that land bank to the value of our land that was acquired by government. And over time, we would be able to sell those shares and receive the value of our land, or we could hold on to it, and as land values appreciate, the value of our shares would appreciate as well. So that is the plan going forward, and that is what we would be working on if we can get this program, this plan to work.
It's too quick to start getting let people digest this. There's holidays, there's Easter holidays coming up. Let's postpone it a bit longer, because otherwise we're going to be rushed like we were the last time. Let's some discussions and bring in other people, and let's have a round table before we start pulling out a referendum or whatever, an indication of whether people support it or not. Let's get a clearer picture.
Yeah, okay, Dave, thank you for that. And yeah, I think we all are happy to take what James has suggested and make sure that we discuss it with the Minister before proceeding any further. Yes, Barry.
Andy, you guys are, this is very brief. You're very aware, obviously this opinion poll has been knocked into 6, into touch, so we're going to referendum. So we need to now go the full legal route. Andy, it's going to be difficult, eh? I assume you guys have got a good team. What looks like confusing there? You said Harry said the opinion poll is to get a gist of what the people are thinking. So whether we go for this offer or not, we'll get a referendum. Is that what, have I missed something?
Sorry, Barry. The steps that we're proposing, and obviously we need to take into account what James has shared with us, would be to determine the level of support for the proposal and maybe some of the things that James has suggested, if the Minister is happy to include those. And if there's broad support, that would be the questions that we would ask in our survey. I don't want to call it a referendum, because the moment we say we had a referendum, the government will jump on it and say, you've had a referendum, this is the support we're going.
Yeah, thanks, Andy.
We need to make sure that it's a non-binding, no obligation survey. No one's bound by it. We're not bound by it. That will give us an indication of whether we proceed to the next stage of the legal addendum and the rest of it.
All right, I understand now, Andy. That's all I'm advising there is, you know, if you link that indifferent deed to this new, very dangerous, extreme, and if you guys don't realize that by now, I know you do, but it's all you've got in front of you. So, hey, that legal thing must be very seriously thought out. Give yourselves time, give the lawyers time. If we need to all look around to find the funds to get the best lawyers in town, you have to. Hey, you can't just have 1 or 2 lawyers doing this. This is twice as difficult as the deed, and I promise you'll have 10 times the questions asked. And give ourselves times to look at it, and yourselves. That's all, Andy. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Barry. Okay, well, I think we'll take one more question or comment.
Good afternoon. My name's Alan Faderb. Just a quick question on the payment schedule there that we have up there. What happens in, say, year 7 if government reneges on their payments? What's the recourse for the farmers? Are government going to want that money back? What's the recourse on that?
And whatever monies the government pay, year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever it is, and they default on the year 7, you keep the money that you've been given. That's yours. That is in lieu of. And I need to emphasize, this deed of accession has caused a lot of concern. The only time you surrender your rights is when they have made full and final payment. Understand that. We argued like hell with government on this issue. And the only compromise was putting it into an escrow. We've already discussed with a company in Harare, and they've agreed that those deed of accessions would be sent to the UK offices, and they will be held in escrow there, and will not be released under any circumstances until every single farmer has been paid in full. Let's be very clear on that issue. So when Jean has left out a few words there, you need to understand that. But if you get the 105 million in interest and he defaults on the 350, they've lost 105 million. And it applies to every year after that.
Okay. I think there's one more here. Thanks.
My name is Irving Hunter. I'm not very clear on the escrow issue. As I understand it, an escrow, it would be offshore for a start, and the funds would be put in before this exercise started. In other words, in year 4, when the escrow becomes valid.
Thank you for that. I should have actually dealt with that earlier. What government has agreed, because the IR payments have been so bad, and what has been happening is, because it falls under agriculture, Ministry of Finance has been transferring the funds to lands. Lands do what they like with it and take their time in paying us. Since, you've got to agree that since it went to AgriBank, things were a lot better. I mean, AgriBank paid out the $1 billion in 3 or 4 days, if I'm right, Wendy, in one day. Okay. What we're doing now is that the interest payments will be put into an account of our choice. We will open that account in here, in the country, or maybe offshore, more preferably. And 35 million will be held there, and we, upon getting verification from Valcon on your valuations and how it's going to be dispersed and what each person gets, we will then disperse it from there. Ministry of Ags will have nothing to do with this money. This money goes under control. At the moment, we're in the process of registering the company, and we're calling for 3 directors. I'm proposing that each signatory appoints a director to administrate that account and get those funds payments. So once the 35 million is paid into our account, we have full control of that, and we'll distribute it according to the Valcon database.
Okay, is there any more questions or comments? I see one more hand there.
It's on. Top table, before I start, just on a comment, not a question. Great thanks to you. I don't know if everybody wants to thank you, but you're in a position which I wouldn't like to be without gloves on my hands. Honestly, you are so patient. I congratulate you for that. A point which I noticed when you were talking about the SAAI initiative is that they made a point that there are people in America who are prepared to help us, provided we give them our title deeds, which we consider worthless. If they are prepared to help us, give us money, we give them our title deeds, surely it's better for us to accept this. And if we then need money, they can buy our bills or bonds off us. It's got a better chance of getting money in return from the bonds than from the title deeds. So why not do it that way? And my last thought, which I just had listening to all these conversations, is that we do naturally, and it's a good thing, to tie up everything legally. But if it does go wrong, people should forget about litigation against government. It's goodwill and negotiation that's going to see us through. How many people have won cases against government? And how many people have got anything out of government? Not just Zimbabwe government, internationally. How do you put government, the whole government in Chikurubi for defaulting? It doesn't happen. It happens outside the country. If you win a case outside this country, you can take some of the, say, Zimbabwean government assets, like they did in South Africa. They take a house or 2 or 3. That doesn't help us at all. So, yes, get it legally wrapped up. But if it goes wrong, gentlemen, don't blame those gentlemen if they can't correct it. You cannot win a case against government on a big scale at any rate. Thank you, ladies, and thank you all.
Sir, I'd like to thank you very much for your kind words, and I would also just like to sort of continue on. The Von Petzold case was referred to a little while ago, and I think he was awarded $200 million. To date, I don't think he's got a cent out of the Zimbabwe government. I know he was offered his farms back, but I'm not sure what's happened on that front either. But we were in a meeting with some senior government officials, very senior government officials, when his case was discussed. And they said, well, we need to try and approach him. And the senior person was told, well, we tried to talk to him, we offered him this and offered him that, and he refused it. So, you know, the attitude was, well, we've tried, we're not interested anymore. Let him row his own boat, basically, was what the response was. So you're right, when it comes to trying to litigate against government, and even with the greatest judgments in your favor, it is the negotiation. And, you know, for us here, and the minister himself talked about it, it comes down to the personalities and the relationships that you build. We have, over the last 3, 4 years, 5 years, I don't know how long this process has been going on, have built some relationships that enable us, that give us access, where we can talk face to face in an atmosphere of mutual respect. It was insinuated some time ago that we negotiate with a gun to our heads. I can assure you that there's been no situation through this process where we've had guns to our heads. There's been no threats against any of us. We push the hardest we can, but at the end of the day, when it comes back to it, if the minister says, I can't do any more, that's it, take it or leave it. We can't push any harder. And I think that's where we had got to with this, and that's why we presented it to you. But I'm very pleased to see how receptive the minister was to some of the suggestions that came from the floor. And we will definitely pursue that and see if we can get those included. And I'd just like to highlight here, when the GCD was being negotiated, it was a very different atmosphere. And the minister himself said, things have changed. They have changed considerably. We fought as hard as we could to get things like signature escrows and things included in that original agreement. And the ministry lawyers and their legal team blocked us and just said, no, this is how it's got to be. So we got the best we could at the time. Things have changed considerably as we see the minister is far more open to suggestions. And even with the concessions that we've already told you about today, there was no objections. I don't think there was nothing we asked him that he didn't agree to. So there's a willingness on his side as well to do whatever it takes to try and come up with something that we can accept. I think the biggest challenge he has is he can't commit to something that he knows he's not going to be able to fulfill. And that's where the $35 million interest payment comes from. He's comfortable that he can meet that. If he doesn't meet that, then he's in trouble. So that's why he won't. We've pushed him as hard as we can on numerous occasions to increase it. And he just says, look, I cannot afford to fail. If I can't meet that payment, then the whole agreement is dead, and all my efforts are to no avail. So just also, we are, as a team, have been involved with African Development Bank. They've called us for meetings. The World Bank have called us for meetings. The head of the World Bank Africa arrives in the country this week, and we are meeting with her next Monday. So, you know, we're not just dealing with the government, we deal with the international financial institutions, and we have met with all the G7 ambassadors, the American ambassador, although we don't have one now, the British ambassador. So we're not making decisions or making recommendations based purely on what we think. We talk to numerous people and we hear what's being, what their views are, and we've tried to assimilate all of that and work as best we can for something that we believe has a chance of working. So I would just like to convey that to you. You have no idea, obviously not being involved in the process of our interactions, and it's very difficult for us to be able to convey those kind of things, the intangibles of this process. But yeah, so I would, in due course, we will have a survey. Obviously, we will do what we can to include some new things in it. But I would like to encourage each one of you to take time to consider the facts and find out from SAI. Try and get some information. What is on offer? What is on the table? What is the time frame? What is the quantum of compensation that might become a reality through their efforts? What's the source of their funds? What's the payment plan? Get some facts and make your decision based on facts, not on social media posts that are flying around or a lot of talk and rhetoric. I know farmers are sensible people on the whole. Some of us maybe miss the mark a little bit and are a bit volatile, but at the end of the day, most of us, we take time to consider the facts and we make sound decisions. So I would like to just leave that with you and close by thanking each one of you for taking time out to be here. Thank those who may be viewing this online. And I would just like to say, may God bless you all and give you wisdom and guidance as you consider the options that are before you. And may He guide you to a wise decision that will work best for you. Thank you very much.
I think we've got it.
Well, I would like to.
$5.6.